saw this interesting MTV fucking fucking meme on whitesplaining, what they have labeled whitesplaining, when white people try to explain things for black people, treating us like perpetual children. And the person who posted it said that one person thought that it was was an actual real thing, and the other person, and she didn't talk about what nationality or what race they were, what ethnicity they were, but the other person thought that it was a very, real argument, that the argument itself had valid. Thought it was just liberal bullshit. And the actuality of, see, those are two different opinions. One is more fact-based and one is less fact-based. In actuality, whitesplaining is some real ass shit done by liberals. And it's not extreme, it's actually a moderate viewpoint because it goes against the extreme left position that leads to whitesplaining. So the idea, and again, these are two different fucking goddamn, opinions about one particular view, one particular perception, or one particular reality. You know what I'm saying? And is white explaining something that white liberals do, and is it fucking offensive when they do it? See, even the white explaining thing is like, from what perspective does the black if the person is black, or they even American, and then do they have to deal with black explaining within the American structure? White explaining within the American structure. Do you have an experience? Do you have something relative, or do you have a relative experience to be able to say that this is a real thing or not a real thing? And are you using the factual aspects of your experience or the idealized aspects of your experience, a parataxic distorted view of your experience? Meaning, like, okay, Candace Owens, who obviously experienced racism because she sued and won in a racial for racial discrimination, but yet says that racism isn't real. It's her ideal that racism isn't real, and it creates a parataxic distortion, and their cognitive dissonance stems from that parataxic distortion that racism isn't real, even though consciously and unconsciously, since she sued, there has to be, she sued someone for racial discrimination, there has to be racial discrimination that exists. You understand what I'm saying? So you could have a idealized view of reality that's not based upon the actual facts, and establish a opinion-based truth that, okay, whitesplaining is not a real thing. But whitesplaining is a real thing, but from your idealized viewpoint, you've created this cognitive dissonance based upon that paradoxical distortion, that you are removed or disconnected from the reality that whitesplaining or even racism is a real thing. You see how that's psychologically unhealthy, and you can prove that that's psychologically unhealthy, to act as if things that are obviously real are not real. It's called being delusional. It's called, it's acting rational under irrational circumstances, which is a psychosis. Acting as if racism is not a real thing while racism is really a real thing is experiencing a psychosis. A cognitive dissonance is a psychosis. You understand what I'm saying? A parataxic distortion in which the cognitive dissonance stems from is a motherfucking is a state of psychosis. And if you're in a state of psychosis, that means you're suffering from mental illness. I don't give a fuck how socially acceptable your mental illness is, it's still mental illness. And a lot of us don't want to see that reality. We don't have any incense. I'm smoking tobacco.
Okay, well, smoking tobacco.
No. I'm smoking right here. And the thing about it is, you can just fucking go, I can open the window, or you can just, fucking close that door. Or do that. So, parataxic distortion is a reality that and sometimes I'm smoking tobacco. A lot of times people think I'm smoking weed, and it's not weed, it's tobacco. You know, and I just don't really fucking say anything about it. But if I'm smoking weed, then you can tell my eyes is tight as fuck. But anyway, this paradoxic distortion. Or paradoxic distortions, or the state of psychosis that most human beings experience in their day-to-day that stems from, you know, our group trauma to some degree or another. So, I mean, white explaining is something that's real. White people do that all the time because, I mean, fucking liberal white people do that all the time. Feel as if they are the adults in the room. I've explained this before, and determine, you know what I'm saying, and black people respond in the same way. As if white people explain it, it sounds somehow better or more credible to them if a white person is explaining to them because they're the perpetual adults or we're the perpetual children. So, again, you can have an idealized viewpoint of reality in which certain realities are not real, or you can have a factual based perception of reality in which realities are real. You know what I'm saying? Your ideal does not make things real. Just because you put a label on something doesn't make it real or unreal. Just because you want to label something by way of liberal bullshit or liberal thought or conservative thought doesn't make it invalid. Your opinions do not make facts invalid. And that's the problem. That's one of the biggest problems with society, is that we think that our opinion or our ideals somehow make the realities invalid. That somehow, and my experience, that my personal experience that builds my ideals somehow makes other people's reality invalid. That if you look at the blacksplaining video, and if you're a black person who've experienced someone trying to explain your struggle as if they can articulate it better than you can, because therefore they're more capable, more intelligent than you are, then, you know what I'm saying, you know, you can't really relate. You don't, that's not your experience. So therefore it's ingenuous of you to attempt to put yourself in a place of someone else's experience based upon your ideal experience, or your experience and making it the ideal experience for everybody else. And that's privilege. You know, white people have this ideal experience that has absolutely, that race does not enter into their their day-to-day existence until someone of a person of color is introduced into their environment, and therefore it shifts their condition to the awareness of the privilege that they have, and therefore stems, you know, the white guilt stems from that. Because it's brought into their awareness that I'm experiencing a level of privilege that I don't necessarily deserve. And there's guilt that derives from that state of privilege that you don't deserve. The privilege is, and that's a privilege to have to see yourself as a human being and nothing else as a human being, but a human being. You know, to see yourself as the idealized human being, and therefore not have to deal with any other alternative views of idealized human beings. When in reality, what we should all do, we should all have the pleasure and the privilege of seeing reality like that. That we are humans, regardless of what ethnicity that our humanity is expressed through, and that we are all not just capable, but all deserving of the respect of being a human being. We all deserve equitable human rights based on the fact that we're all human, not based upon any ethnicity associated with our humanity, that we are all humans. White people in this current structure have the privilege of having the privilege of being the only individuals on the planet primarily who have the right to walk this planet and consider themselves as nothing but human and not a subdivision of human. People of color have to think of themselves primarily in this, you know, global construct as being subhuman. inferior to their white counterpart. That's white privilege. And, somebody posted something about China and how Chinese have developed this white inferiority complex, where they are inferior to white complexion, inferior to whites in intelligence and politeness and so on and so forth, and how that idea is permeating the Chinese, population. And it's proving detrimental to how Chinese people view themselves. And therefore view, and then it's having maladaptive effects upon their interpersonal relationships. White supremacy is bad. By every stretch of the imagination is bad, and it has nothing but negative effects on the cultures in which are infected by it. White supremacy in any form or fashion, even in whitesplaining, is a version of white supremacy. As if white people understand, by way of some indirect association, being raised around black people, having, black family members, having black children, as being some some means of empathizing with the struggle of black people is is white privilege. And it's an idea of white superiority. That is, if they are the adults in the room and that we're their perpetual children. And I've been talking about whitesplaining for forever and a day before I even fucking goddamn, saw the terminology associated with it. I mentioned the harms and the ills of white liberals taking command of the narrative of black folks. No other ethnicity should control the narrative of another ethnicity. White people should not have control over the narrative in relationship to our struggle, our oppression, or our liberation. We are the ones who should control, because then we're still being oppressed. We're still being codependent. In order to be independent, we should be in control of our narrative. That's independence. Asians don't need, Hispanics, so-called Hispanics don't need, and all these other individuals don't need someone else to explain their narrative for them, or to articulate their narrative for them. No one is expected to comprehend their narratives better than they do. We are the only people who have someone else interpret or articulate our narrative and claim that somehow they can articulate it and comprehend it better than we can. And that is oppression, plain and simple.